Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup episode. Today I'm taking a bit of a different turn. We are doing an unsolved case today, and this will be the unsolved disappearance of Brandon Swanson. Now, in the early hours of May the 14th, 2008, Brandon Swanson was on his way home from a gathering that he had to celebrate the end of the school year. On his route back home, he would get involved in a minor accident where his car went into a ditch, but ultimately he was okay. Brandon, he called his parents for help. He was on the phone to his parents for 47 minutes, trying to guide them to where he was so they could pick him up and take him back home. The parents, they are remaining on this call with Brandon. They are trying their best to find him. When 47 minutes into this call, Brandon would shout, "Oh." After this, it was just dead silence before the line went completely dead. Brandon would never be seen or heard from ever again, and his parents are just left with this devastation of not knowing what has happened to their son. And those last two words would be the final words that his parents would hear. Now, before I do get into this case, please make sure you are subscribed with the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload, which is every Wednesday and Sunday, 7:30 British Standard Time. I am working on some random cases and videos that I can sprinkle throughout as well to give you some extra content, just to show my appreciation for all your love and support. Any details of what I've used on my face, my social media handles, my email, all of that is in the description below for you as well. So go check that out if there is anything that you would like to know. If I can find resources online, charities or phone numbers, etc., of who you can contact regarding Brandon Swanson's case, if you feel you have any information, I will try and list all that down below as well for you. Of course, I'm in the UK, it makes it a bit more difficult, but I will absolutely try. But without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into this case. Where is Brandon Swanson? So I might be wrong, but I think the last unsolved case that I did was Bible John, which I done months ago. I never really do unsolved cases because I hate not having closure at the end, knowing what happened, who did what, etc. But I really feel like I need to cover more of these cases. But I do feel like these cases need to be spoken about so much more, because as much as we don't like not having closure, imagine how the families feel. And I would hate to think that these people end up forgotten because people aren't talking about the cases because there's no that closure at the end. So Brandon Victor Swanson, he was born on the 30th of January of 1989, and he was born in Marshall, Lyon County of southwestern Minnesota. Brandon was the oldest of two children to both Brian and Annette Swanson, and this family were so close. And I feel like this is so important for this case, and we'll get into that further down the line. But bear in mind that he was so close with both his parents, his sibling, family, friends, everyone in his life he was very close with. And Brandon, he has been described as being incredibly intelligent ever since he was a child. His intelligence only seemed to grow as he got older, and he was also described as being absolutely hilarious. He could make anyone laugh. If they were having a bad day, he could turn it around in a second. And of course, with him being so intelligent, he really excelled in school. He really seemed to enjoy reading. It wasn't just something he did in school, but also outside of it. His teachers, his peers always said that he had great potential. He was so dedicated and really applied himself to everything that he was doing. Now, Brandon, he went on to graduate from Marshall High School in 2007, and then he decided that he was going to study wind turbines for a year. And I didn't even know that you could do this, but apparently you can. And he was going to do this for a year at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. Now, this college was in Canby, which I believe is about 45-ish minutes from Marshall, where he lives. So by the time Brandon was 19, he was 5'6" and he was ready to go off to college. He did initially plan to attend this college for a year and then he wanted to transfer. So his plans were to transfer to Iowa Western Community College, and here he would major in science, which so impressive. I mean, don't think just anyone can major in science. You have to be very intelligent, which we know he was. Now, I'm sure every single one of us can agree, even like high school if you never went to college or university, but come the end of that year, you're just so ready to let loose and have a bit of fun, enjoy yourself. And this is exactly what Brandon was doing on May the 13th of 2008. So Brandon, this night, he is celebrating with his college friends from Minnesota West Community and Tech College. So they're all having a good time. He had quite a few gatherings to go to. Like, he was quite popular. He had a lot of friends in college. So one of the gatherings was in Lind, which was near his hometown of Marshall. The next one was in Minnesota, and then the last one of that evening would be in Canby, which, as we've said, is around 45 minutes from his home in Marshall, so about 35 miles away. The one in Canby, although it was the last one that he would attend, it was also a really important one. This was actually a send-off for one of his classmates, as well as an end-of-year celebration. And as we can all imagine, this is college parties. There is most likely going to be alcohol, maybe even, you know, some drugs. Shouldn't be, but there could be. And on this evening at each of the 3 gatherings, witness reports would state that they did see Brandon having a drink at each of the gatherings. One person said that he had a shot of whiskey. People were saying that he didn't really seem overly intoxicated, and then other people would say that he didn't seem intoxicated at all. I don't know what to think, because maybe like the first gathering he wouldn't have been intoxicated, but then maybe as the night went on, he became more and more intoxicated, but it's hard to tell. Now, I do have to say that Brandon, he was driving this night, and of course, I know what you'll be thinking. He is driving under the influence. I don't know just how intoxicated he was. Of course, you shouldn't drive if you've been drinking, but please don't pass judgment in the comments and say nasty things, because at the end of the day, this boy has disappeared. He has went missing. He has a family who is heartbroken. So of course, after this third and last gathering in Canby, Brandon is going to head home, so he's driving. Now, the route from Canby to Marshall, right, we've said about 45 minutes, 35 miles. It wasn't one that was unusual to Brandon at all, because he would basically drive there every day for classes anyway, and he would usually go via the highway. He would usually take the same route all the time, the Minnesota State Highway 68, but for some reason on this night, Brandon chose to drive the rural back roads on his way home. People say like they don't understand why he did this, and I obviously can't guess, but I was thinking if he is intoxicated, maybe he thinks it's a bit risky to drive on the highway, like there might be police, he might get pulled over, charged, you know. There's a whole lot of reasons that it could be, but that's sort of the first one that came to mind for me, and he maybe thought if he went the rural back roads that this would be less likely, because it's less likely to have police on it. So Brandon, he was on his route home, and then around 1:15 a.m. he would encounter the 3900 block of Lyon Lincoln Road, and it would be at this point when suddenly Brandon's car would veer right off the road. Now, as his car veered off the road, he of course lost complete control. He wound up being hung up in a ditch. Luckily, this would be a minor accident all around. He wasn't injured, and the car also seemed fine as well, which is a bloody miracle. So at first, Brandon is trying to reach friends back at the party, any friends nearby, and he can't get anyone. Everyone's busy, like it's spring break, you know? Everyone's just having a bit of a crazy night. And he's basically calling these friends to tell them what happened, see if anyone's available to come and collect him because he needs a lift home. But unfortunately, these friends are all busy. No one would be able to answer his calls. So around 1:54 a.m, Brandon's like, right, I'm going to have to bite the bullet. I need help. I'm going to have to call my parents, which phoning your parents at that time in the morning can be a scary ordeal. What if they are annoyed at you? I just want to say, if you ever find yourself in a scary situation or in the situation that Brandon is in, you should always phone your parents or primary caregiver for help. Whilst they might be a bit annoyed now, trust me, they are going to be absolutely so glad that you're okay. Like, if they have to go out of their way this one time to make sure you're safe, they are going to rather that than you not phoning them because you're scared of their reaction. So Brandon, he makes his phone call to his parents. He explains to them that the car veered off the road. He's wound up in a ditch just off of like a gravel road. And he did ask them for assistance, but the only problem that they would have just now is Brandon didn't really know where he was. He's taken this new route home. Now, Brandon's parents, being the absolute angels that they are and just wanting to make sure their son is safe, they tell Brandon that they will come out in their car and they will look for him up, the back of these rural roads that he must be on. Brandon's parents, Brian and Annette, they were worried that Brandon might be injured, but he reassured them that he's not injured and the car isn't injured either, miraculously. It's just been this minor accident and the only assistance he needs is to be picked up and brought home. And this is what they plan to do. So Brandon says to his parents that he will wait by his car because if he waits there, it should be easier for them to find him rather than him wandering off in an area that he's not familiar with. Although he didn't know where he was, he thought that he might have an idea because he could see some lights in the distance that looked like it was coming from a town, and he assumed that this would be the town of Lind. Now, because he thought he was near the town of Lind, he was guesstimating that he was about 10 minutes from his home, like a 10-minute drive. So he told his parents just to, kind of drive out 10 minutes on the rural roads and hopefully they'll see each other. So Brian and Annette, they set off in the car to find Brandon, and this whole time they're remaining on the call with him. Like, they don't want to hang up, they want to make sure he's safe, remain safe, nothing bad happens. So they're staying on the call, sort of communicating where they're at, and he's describing where he is, and they have both agreed that they would flash their headlights on and off just to let each other know that it's them. Now, they did this multiple times when they thought that they might see each other, but every single attempt failed. Now, of course, both of them doing this countless amounts of times, thinking that maybe they've found each other, Brandon starts to get exhausted and he can be heard on the phone saying, "Can't you see me?" And his parents said that he just sounded exasperated. Now, of course, at this point, Brandon just wants to get to his parents. He just wants to get home. And his parents are feeling the same. They just want to locate their son safe and sound and get him home. But the method of finding Brandon was ultimately failing. So Brandon says, "You know what? I will walk toward the lights in the distance, which should be the town of Lind, and I'll just meet you in the parking lot of a tavern in Lind." I think they specified what tavern this would be, but I couldn't find anything online to say what one it was. Some even state that it was a nightclub, but I can't be sure. And so at this point, Brandon then sets off and starts heading toward the lights that he can see in the distance. Now, as they had when Brandon was waiting by the car and they were driving toward where they thought he would be, Brian and Annette, they remained on the phone with Brandon on his journey toward Lind, or what he thought was Lind. Now, it was pitch black at this point, of course, and Brandon, desperate to get home, he tells his parents that he's going to try and take some shortcuts. There's some fields and some rural areas that he can sort of go through that he thinks will get him to the town faster. So at one point, Brandon says that he is cutting across a field, and on multiple occasions he would say to his mum and dad that he's like going over a fence, or there's another fence. There was also a lot of gravel roads and they could hear water running in the distance. So Brandon, he is continuing his walk toward the lights that he can see in the distance. He is still on the phone to his mum and dad, and it was around 47 minutes into the call when everything would change. So after those 47 minutes on this phone call, that is when Brandon would say the last words ever heard from him. Brandon was heard suddenly exclaiming, "Oh shit." His parents were asking him, "What's wrong? Like, what's happened? Brandon, are you there? Brandon, can you answer us?" Because the line just went silent, and those moments felt like minutes to Brian and Annette when they were getting no answer from Brandon. And this agonising feeling was just building up inside of them, like something was wrong. And then the line goes dead. And it is just so sad to think that those last 2 words were the last words that Brandon spoke to his parents, and those words are concerning. It sounds like something's happened and they don't know what. Brandon's father, Brian, had said, and nothing happened after that. Now, initially, Brian had thought that Brandon might have slipped and fallen into a body of water because, you know, as we've said, they could hear water running in the distance, and they thought possibly he slipped and fell into something, which is a horrifying thought. And at this point, they are absolutely terrified, wondering what's happened to their son. Has he fallen in that water? So they phone Brandon back multiple times. Each time it rings out and goes to voicemail. But in a way, it's kind of like a positive thing that it's ringing out and then going to voicemail, because it means that his phone's still on and his phone's not been submerged in the water. Now, of course, Brian and Annette, they are searching all night for their son. They are not giving up. They are determined to find him. But unfortunately, come the morning, they still weren't able to locate Brandon or even his car. Now, after desperately searching for their son for the entire night, come 6:30 a.m, Annette and Brian, they decide, you know, we need to get the police involved in this because something might have happened to our son and we need to find him. So they contact the police for some help. When they contacted the police and informed them that their son was missing, to be quite honest, the police couldn't have cared less. They really seemed like they just didn't care. They told the parents that due to Brandon's age, it is his right to go missing if he wants to. Are you kidding me? They also said that it wasn't unusual for people of Brandon's age to go missing without contacting their parents. However, Brandon did contact his parents. Brandon tried to contact his friends. Brandon was not trying to go missing, he was trying to be found. And this honestly just infuriates me and makes my blood boil, because how in the hell is a boy calling his parents for help meaning that he wants to go missing? Make it make sense. It does not. And I honestly cannot believe this. Well, actually, do you know what? I can believe it because this happens all too often. But the police wouldn't even get involved until just before noon that next day. There is a boy missing in a rural area that is near water that he could potentially have fallen into, and you're waiting that amount of time to get involved. Ridiculous. Anyway, so his cell records, they are examined and they're able to see that the last location when he was talking to his parents, he was actually near Porter of Minnesota. Now this means that the town he could see in the distance wasn't actually Lind, and he was actually 25 miles away from where he thought he was and where he had asked his parents to go, and that is why they couldn't find each other. And this honestly just like, I don't know why, but this bit just really upset me because it's full of like what ifs, and it's just so devastating to think that they were never looking in the right area for their son because he wasn't where he thought he was. Now, it was around 12:30 in the afternoon when Brandon's Chevrolet Lumia would be found in a ditch. Now, this was on the borders of Lincoln and Yellow Medicine, which is just, I believe, just over a mile from Taunton. Now, the Lincoln County Sheriff, Jack Dezecki, he had said that the way that the car was positioned in this ditch would have meant that Brandon wouldn't have got the traction that he needed to get the car out of the ditch. So there was no way that he could have got out of this himself. And he also confirmed, like Brandon had said to his mum and dad, there was no sign of injury occurring to Brandon. There was no like blood. There was no real damage done to the car. The car was pretty perfect, minus the fact that it was in a ditch. Now, despite them being able to locate Brandon's car, in this car, they did not find any of his personal belongings, so not his car keys, nothing. The only thing that was laying in the car was his glasses, which is really strange because Brandon is actually legally blind in one eye, so he requires his glasses wherever he goes, and especially when he is driving or when it's dark. Now, there was hundreds, and I mean hundreds of volunteers that came together with the police to search for 19-year-old Brandon Swanson. They had brought in sniffer dogs and air surveillance in order to try and locate him. Now, devastatingly, they would search, but the weeks turned into months, and then the months would turn into years. But over those initial first couple of months when they were looking for Brandon, law enforcement and also the volunteers, they had searched in every method that they could. They were on horseback, they were on foot, they had all-terrain vehicles, everything that they could think of to comb through the area, and the area that he went missing in was huge. Now, they obviously scoured multiple bodies of water. They even checked the Yellow Medicine River, which is where they thought Brandon may have fallen into, and the canines, they had actually took the police and the volunteers to the Yellow Medicine River. They followed a scent to there, but once they got there, the scent was lost. That led police to believe possibly he did go into the river. It's also worth mentioning as well that to get to the Yellow Medicine River from the car, well, the ditch that the car was in, that was around a 3-mile walk. Now, whilst they were going along this route that the sniffer dogs had taken them down, they noticed that there is no personal belongings, no clothing, no cell phone that belongs to Brandon. They were unable to locate any personal items, full stop. Now, they did also search across the 2-mile stretch of the river area, which took around 6 hours, and there was still nothing there either. Now, as we were saying, due to the scent being lost around the Yellow Medicine River, police did initially believe that Brandon could possibly have fallen in there and tragically drowned. However, they did such an extensive search of the Yellow Medicine River that they concluded that there was absolutely no way that he had fallen in there, because surely by now they would have located his body. Now, because the police are going away from, the theory that he's drowned in the river, they're thinking that maybe he's fallen into the river, but he was able to get himself back out. He has continued walking, but then he's gotten hypothermic and passed away from hypothermia somewhere in the rural area. Now, they did think that this was really possible because the temperature that evening had fallen below 40 degrees. Ultimately, the police concluded that they didn't believe there was any foul play involved. Now, it was also said that police sniffer dogs, they had indicated that there was human remains near Mud Creek, which was north of Porter. However, when they went and they checked this area, there was no human remains there. And within this area, they did search in the exact area that the dogs had went to, but also all of the surrounding area as well, just to be sure. Nothing turned up. Now, police did state that Brandon essentially could be anywhere within a 120 square mile area. Now, due to this being such a large area, from where the car had went in the ditch, and also the time frame that he was on the phone to his parents, no one can really say what direction he went in, how long for. And of course, heartbreakingly, to this very day, the body of Brandon Swanson has still not been found. So what I am going to do now is get into the theories that exist surrounding Brandon's disappearance, and then sort of discuss which one we think is the most plausible. If you have any other theories down below, please let me know. And if you are local to this area, or you have heard something or know something, then I will leave resource links down below where you can get in contact with someone and hopefully try and help find this young boy. Of course, people aren't hopeful that Brandon would be found alive, but his parents and his family, friends, they deserve closure on what happened to their loved one. So if you do know anything, please look down below and give any information that you possibly can. So the first theory that I really want to get into is from one of the volunteer firefighters. Now, his name is Darren E. Delzer. Now, as we were saying earlier, Brandon was obviously legally blind in one eye, which he was required to wear glasses for. And of course, as we know, he left the glasses in the vehicle that day, so his sight would not be at its best. He was essentially only able to see properly in one eye. Now, what I hadn't mentioned earlier is before Brandon was heard exclaiming, "Oh shit," he had actually said to his dad, "Oh, not another fence." Now, this led the firefighter to believe that when Brandon was going over this fence, that he was like, "Oh, not another fence." They believe that when he was going over this fence, he potentially never noticed like a well or a cistern, which is very common in these rural areas, and that he might have fell down one of these. Now, the only issue that I would have with that theory is his phone was still on, that call was still active when he went silent. Wouldn't there be you know, a scream, a shout, something when he was falling. But then maybe if he hit his head, then there wouldn't be, but would hear like a thud at least if he got in. I don't know how I feel about that one. Now, another theory, and I have to say this one is one that I just do not believe at all. The other theory was that Brandon went missing by decision, like the police had tried to say at the start. Some people believe that Brandon decided to go missing and that he now lives under another identity. He doesn't want anyone to know where he is and that he has this whole brand new life. I just cannot get on board with that theory at all because he literally called for help. He called for help because he wanted to go home. He didn't go missing by decision. I know some people could maybe set it up that way so it looks like they wanted to go home, and then people like me on the internet say, well, he didn't want to go home because he has to get picked up. I just don't believe it. He was so close with his family, and I just do not see a world in which he would decide to go missing. Now, other people try to claim that they believe that Brandon had a complete mental breakdown, which, you know, ultimately led to him going missing. His parents have really pushed against this because Brandon seemed to be completely lucid whilst he was on the phone to them. They weren't concerned about his mental well-being. Of course, they were concerned for his safety, but they never once thought that anything was mentally wrong. And also, he has no history of mental illness whatsoever, so this would be really, really out of the blue for them. I know mental breakdowns can come out of nowhere, but I just don't believe it in this situation, and neither does his parents. Now, this particular theory, whilst it does have a lot of people that believe it's possible, which, you know, in these cases, I mean, anything really could be possible, but there's a lot of people who just don't believe this at all, and that is a theory regarding Brandon either falling in the water and getting back out, or falling in the water and drowning. Now, people don't believe this because, like we were saying earlier, when Brandon went silent, the call was still active. Now, if he had fallen in the water, his phone would have cut out, and ultimately, any calls that were made to that phone would have went straight to voicemail. But they didn't. They were ringing because the phone was still on. So it was ringing through and then going to voicemail. So the phone hadn't cut out, and back then, phones were not waterproof. Now, other people who believe this theory, they say, well, you know, maybe he fell into the water and his phone had fallen on the ground, which means that, yes, it would still be working. But because no phone has been found, they can't corroborate this story. Now, other people believe that it might be possible that Brandon went to seek shelter in an abandoned building in that rural area. Now, they believe that, you know, if he's fallen into the water and gotten back out, or even when the temperature dropped, if he's got too cold, when he's went into this abandoned building, maybe he has passed away from hypothermia. However, police go against this theory because they searched all of the abandoned buildings around this rural area and there was no remains, no personal belongings, nothing relating to Brandon Swanson found. Now, I should say as well, there's a lot of people out there that believe that Brandon might have been involved in a hit and run. You know, he might have been struck by a car or some kind of vehicle. The driver might have panicked, has taken his body and disposed of it. But again, no body has been found. So where would it have been disposed of? But then I suppose if they're only searching, you know, within this area, and I'm saying only this area, even though it's huge, but if this is the area they're focusing on, what if someone had taken his body to a completely different area, an area that they're not looking at? Like, that, you know, it's plausible, but I don't know. Now, Annette Swanson, Brandon's mum, she believes that had the police taken her seriously from the moment that she reported her son missing, they might have avoided this and his disappearance may have been solved. And, you know, at first I was kind of like, oh, well, you know, would it have been? But I suppose had they checked cell records, etc. before, they would have been able to see where he was on the phone and then check that area quicker. But I don't know, because like if he's no there, he's no there. I'm not sure, but I can understand completely why she would feel that way, and they absolutely should have took her seriously from the first minute she reported her son missing. I put on too much blush and it's really pigmented and it's just not going anywhere, so I look like Coco the Clown, but hopefully it all comes together for the finished result. Now, states, they actually don't require a waiting period to look for someone after they've been reported missing, but that seems to be what they choose. There is priority cases if someone is known to be mentally or physically impaired or, in grave danger or at the risk of harming themselves or others. These cases would be prioritised, and also if they thought foul play was evident in a case, that would also be prioritised. But the states don't have a certain time period that they have to abide to, so they could have looked for Brandon right away had they wanted to, but they didn't. Now, because of this, Annette and Brandon Swanson, they decided to propose a law under Brandon's name. Now, this would require law enforcement to take a missing persons report without delay after notification of someone missing under dangerous circumstances. No matter the age of the person, they should immediately conduct a preliminary investigation to determine if the person is missing and whether the person is endangered, and should also notify all other law enforcement agencies of the situation. Now, Brandon's law would be signed into law by Minnesota's then Governor, Tim Pawlenty, on May the 7th of 2009, and Brandon's law went into official effect July the 1st, 2009. I think we can all agree that Brandon Swanson's parents doing this just shows the kind of people that they are. They're putting something like this in place so that what happened to their son doesn't happen to anyone else's child. These are people who care about everyone, who wants the best for everyone, and I'm just so happy that Brandon's law got accepted and put into effect, because I think what that law is so bloody important, and it is definitely needed. As always, I just want to say that my thoughts, prayers, love goes out to the family and friends of Brandon Swanson, and I can only hope and pray that one day we can find Brandon. It would be amazing if Brandon truly was still out there, but if he's not, if his body could be found to be returned to his parents for a proper burial and to give them that closure that they so desperately need and deserve. And I know you always do, but please keep Brandon, his family, his friends, all of his loved ones in your thoughts and prayers. But that is it for today's case. I really hope this one was interesting for you. It is a bit different from what I'd usually do, but I just feel like these unsolved ones, they are so important, and I definitely need to speak about them more. So I will be doing a lot more unsolved cases, unsolved disappearances, whatever I possibly can. And if there is any resources out there that I can get in contact with or help you guys get in contact with, then I'm absolutely going to try my best. All the information that you need will be listed down below in the description. You will also find my TikTok and Instagram handles alongside my email address, where you can send your cases to me via email, or you can just leave them in the comments if you would prefer, because they all get put on a big list anyway, so it really doesn't matter. If you're interested on any of the details of things that I've used on my face today, I will have them all linked down below if there's anything you want to check out or purchase for yourself. That is it for today. Please stay safe, look after each other, be a good person, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!